layers instruments are usually for self-reported data, and the advantage, as you know, is tend to be mostly quantitative. You can do a lot of, for example, psychometric analysis and all that. Published, well-developed measures are likely to have higher reliability and validity. Right? But the downside is it may not be tailored to the concepts and variables in your specific research questions. Right? But the most appealing objective, the advantage is to, again, analyze it statistically using, very objective tools. Right? And the common practice, as you know, is pre-post design. Right? So this is a very, very, well-known kind of methodology. And the other means is to use experiments, but here I need to put it in scare quotes, right? Because it's sometimes considered very unethical to use your students as experimental subjects. Right? And I also mentioned this in the bullets here. Right? Sometimes it's unrealistic. Even many people would suggest you do an A/B test or whatever. It usually kind of you won't get past the ethics committee. Right? If you want to do this. Right? So usually we'll do cross cohorts, trying to do different things across different cohorts. At least within a single class, you are being consistent. You are not discriminating any students. Right? Slightly more technical or more sophisticated techniques would be something like discourse or text analysis. This requires some professional to help. Right? Again, I will mention this, how to find these kind of people in this institution. The work they will help you to do is to analyze word for word, sentence by sentence, the semantic or even the underlying rationale from the interviewees, for example. And it's actually a very useful tool if you really want to know more about the learning effectiveness, in my opinion. Secondary analysis is something that I already came across earlier, is to use other kind of system data, objective data, like the learning management system data or the student evaluation forms and all this stuff. Right? Again, in this university, we fully support you to make use of this data. And finally, a very obvious choice is to mix a combination of these different methodologies. Right? Trying to combine them as you see appropriate. As in my own case, I use many of the methodologies that I mentioned earlier in these couple of slides. Like I do a survey at the end, I do focus group, I use the learning management system data, I use the Google data to try to triangulate how effective the students' interactions are. And later on, at the final cohort, we even try to use some discourse analysis to analyze the comments made by the student, right, as they progress. Right? Because initially, they are not making very meaningful comments. They make comments for the sake of making comments. But towards the end, they make meaningful comments. So we can prove, in a way, that they are improving the knowledge and even the confidence. So choosing a research method is also a problem. I understand that. Here I want to list out several possible scenarios for your reference. Right? There are several important dimensions. Here I listed three. Right? The first dimension is you need to consider what kind of research do you want to do. Right? If you are trying to explore an issue, for example, if your question is having students log the reasons why they didn't do the recommended readings is a valid research question. And we encounter this all the time. Right? Students don't read. Right? But why? Right? We want to log the reasons. We want to ask them. Right? Then we probably need to use content analysis, focus groups, open-ended surveys, interviews to tease out the real reasons why. And once you know the reasons, hopefully you can address those problems and encourage your students to read. Right? And the second possible scenario is testing an idea or hypothesis. Right? If your question, let's say, is, did the guest lecture yield deeper understanding of primary concepts in this module? Again, a very valid question. We all do guest lectures from time to time. right? We probably will then need to use post-lecture test results, survey instruments, and interviews, right? So it depends on what kind of questions that you are asking. The second dimension is not really about a question per se, it's about the level of generalization you want to achieve. Like the first scenario is if you are trying to tackle the understanding and complexity of the situation. For example, if the question is, why was activity X engaging to student? Right? I asked this question myself, right? Because one time I worked with the course team and the colleagues who support me. I will also mention those colleagues again later on. Trying to do gamification in the classroom. Right? We ask students to play games. Right? It's very engaging, right? But we want to know exactly why. Right? Is it because it's just entertaining or educational or they build confidence? Right? We want to know why before we want to regularize, so to speak, these kind of activities. Right? The second possible scenario is you want to generalize the results as much as possible. Right? Like, for example, another question that I also asked myself, I put it in a more generic form here, is which specific element of activity X are related to students' report of more engagement? Right? This is very difficult to find out, in fact, right? Because students give you very, very superficial answers. We have to do much more, different kinds of twists to tease out the exact parameters. But I want to tell you that we fail at the end because it's very difficult. Right? We can't really find that out. The final dimension I suggest is which perspectives matter most in your teaching and learning situation. Right? Again, these are big questions. Right? Learning as reflected in assignments. You might want to ask yourself, really, right? Is that really true? Right? Observation of certain behaviors, participants' voice. These kind of bigger questions, probably, again, you need to use different tools, methodologies to find your answers. Before I close, I want to say something about impact, like very, very quick. Like I'm attentive to my time. Right? This is a very strong statement. Like peer review papers have very little impact on practice. Like very, very strong, very general statement. But the fact that I'm putting it on the screen is I kind of agree to it to some extent. Right? I'm talking about myself, actually. I wrote some papers, I got some citations, but when I actually look at the so-called impact, without jeopardizing my contract renewal, there's not much impact, actually. So what I'm trying to put up after this statement is subtle, my own experience, is that it's very impactful. Right? Because first off, you help your classroom. Right? There will maybe 50, 100 students in your classroom. Cohort by cohort, you can count several hundreds, thousands of students will benefit. Right? And another thing, again, I'm speaking about my own experience. I read some of the experts in education's papers, and I learned from them. I put their tricks into my classroom. It works, right? So the paper actually benefit me, and if I try to derive some more variation, I publish again, right? Then it benefit more people. So you count citations by heads, right? How many heads you have held, right? It's a huge impact, in my opinion. It's much more important than the so-called citation counts, right? Because sometimes, I mentioned this many times, I will mention it again. Every time I have the opportunity to stand behind a podium, I say this. Some of my citations are what I call citation in passing. Let me explain. Right? Usually when you write a sentence in your paper, you put in a number of citations. Some of my papers appear in that list without further explanations. Why they put my paper there? That's what I call citations in passing. It's just there, no explanations. Not positive, not negative, no nothing. Right? Some of my citations are even worse, right? Negative. Right? Like Danny cited my paper. And actually Danny criticized me. So I don't want that kind of citations. Right? But for teaching and learning, you are counting real bodies, warm bodies, your students, your colleagues, institutional, international, you are benefiting real people. So I'm just trying to convince you that kind of impact, to me at least, is even more important. I have no time to go through this diagram, but I just want to say that this is a progression, a 4-quadrant progression. Right? One quadrant is you eventually go about publishing your teaching, you advertise your tricks, right? You show your evidence, but everyone begins in the 3rd quadrant, practice of teaching. Right? You practice. Right? And then you can progress to scholarly teaching, right? Like what I did. I learned from the expert. I used her trick in my classroom. It worked. Right? It's so scholarly teaching. Right? And then you share about your teaching in a forum like this. Not yet publishing internationally, but it's a very good step already. And eventually you go about publishing. Right? I don't have time to go through this, but I might have time next week to go through this. So just to advertise, next week we will have more subtle events. So there are many other impacts to explore. In the interest of time, I will skip this because this is a very common sense. If you ask me to characterize impact, I want to throw out several keywords, triple A's, accountable, advancing, and actionable. Accountable means your impact can relate to effectiveness. Advancing is you are pushing the envelope. You enhance the teaching effectiveness. You enhance your students' learning. Actionable is your impact can be transferred to other people. Right? So I want to quote several of my former colleagues' interview answers before I close. So this is a colleague from the Faculty of Architecture. Right? He has a very heavy teaching load by UGC standard, but not by our standard, I know. So what he said is the reality of his teaching load is very high, but it's at least 13 hours per week face-to-face class time, and after doing this innovation, it demonstrates some effectiveness. I skipped some of this, but the most important thing is the last sentence. It's enormous commitment, undeniably requires care, planning, attention, and innovation. So just to show you that you are not alone. Right? Some people are also extremely busy, heavily loaded, but still can manage to publish some good papers. And this is a nursing colleague in my former institution, and she said the empirical research on evaluating the newly developed teaching innovations cannot be overlooked because it provides information for improvement, in particular about implementation process and learning outcomes achievements. And the keywords at the end are big classes with more than 200 students. Right? So just to show you the kind of impact in real life. This is also a very meaningful quote. Again, I don't have time to go through it word by word, but it's very common, even in this university. We will sometimes be pressurized to see other people doing well, right? And you are motivated to do the same. Right? So this person attended a talk about the review of the lecturer grade, including research as one of the components for assessments. And so this is the time that the person tried to do something in the teaching and improve the CV. The final couple of slides is just to again give you some more support. The first very, very useful support is this link. I can share the slides with you, and you can scan this code or go to this link and find this form, and you can start to build your narrative as your research plan. And this really final slides brings me back to a notion that I alluded to many times in the talk. Right? First of all, ethics is very important. Don't skip it. Right? And in terms of support, first off is Alpine. Right? Alpine, under the leadership of the provost, the director, and Billy and other many experts in the center, actually provide the kind of people that help me, but they will help you. Right? What I'm saying is, I'm a teacher. I'm an engineering teacher. Right? I only know engineering stuff. I only know how to teach engineering topics. I don't know about the methodologies. I don't know about data collection. I don't know about the instruments. I don't know about the theory. That's the most scary part to me at the time. So I went to a center like Alpine, and they have experts to join me in the effort. They will help in those areas, the theory and all that. And of course, then you form a team, and the team can write up the papers. So here is one of the important messages I want to get across to you. You don't need to do everything by yourself. You can come to Alpine, find the director and other colleagues associated with Alpine. They will help you, right, in conducting the research, to give you advice. Right? So this is the thing that I alluded to many times. Right? We can do this here. I did this in my former institution. The second unit that you also want to try to contact is Aalto. Right? Aalto also have a little bit expertise in this area. And one thing that I want to also reiterate is the university recently launched many new schemes. The software research fund, not much, but it's quite good for you to hire a research assistant or do some experiments in the university. I mentioned teams a couple minutes ago. The university also has a team-based research fund, which is more generous. Right? If you are talking about inter-institution, it can go up to the millions level of funding. Right? For software research, it's quite decent, in my opinion. How do you get inter-institutional team? My experience, again, I towards the end of my courses in my former institution, I teamed up with some people from Japan and Korea because I met them in conferences, in teaching conferences, by the way. And we do a very simple thing. We do comparative study. Because we have similar courses, we can compare the effectiveness, which is very meaningful, because then you can lump into different kinds of parameters, like cultural differences, different kind of educational system, and so on. And finally, the university always give out inspirational teaching award, right? And being able to do SOCTO to supplement your teaching is definitely a big plus. Right? So I will stop here by reiterating the takeaways. Right? So SOCTO is very, very doable, systematic inquiry, and the impact of SOCTO is very high, as I have tried very hard to convince you. Right? And there is enthusiastic support in the university for you to do this. Right? Thank you very much. Sorry for the overrun.
Thank you very much again for making